So it's time to rank the latest leaks in Marvel Snap. We got a new patch, which means we've got a bunch of new data mined cards. I think 8 new cards in this video. They're all a bunch of X-Men characters I've never seen before, but I'm sure there'll be some big fans out there who will tell us all about these characters. And I'm going to do my best to tell you all about these cards. Now, do keep in mind, none of these cards are final. These could get big changes before they actually make it into the game. Sometimes that's number tweaks. Sometimes at this stage, they get complete reworks of their text. So we might see, 5 or 6 of these show up exactly as they are. We might see a couple get completely reworked. So that said, if anything looks crazy broken, may not actually show up that way. Speaking of which, let's talk about our first card, Surge. This is a 2/2 with a really cool text line. On reveal, give the top card of your deck -1 cost and +1 power. After you play it, repeat this ability. So basically here, a little chain where you play this down on turn 2. As long as you keep playing your top card, then you get, a really nice discount and power boost every single turn. So kind of on turn 3, 4, 5, and 6, you would expect that extra +1 power, which means this is a +4 total. And you would expect 4 energy cost savings as well, which is really nice. That kind of makes this look like a -2 cost card that is 6 power, which clearly very, very efficient there. And I don't actually think it's all that challenging to build a deck list where that's going to be easily achieved. You want to be careful not to have expensive stuff, because if you played this on 2 and then drew a 6 drop that would be reduced down to 5, it would take a while to get that next chain. But in particular, decks that are running 3 or 4 cost cards at a top end, if you draw a 4 drop, it's going to cost 3. You'll be able to play that just fine after Surge. And we've seen plenty of decks that can succeed that way. I mean, think about a Silver Surfer deck. Often they'll have a bunch of 3s, maybe a couple 4s. A 2 drop fits in really nicely there when played on turn 2. And that could be a great home. We've seen other decks just, run a selection of 4s and not run any other bigger stuff. So I do think building a deck list around this to satisfy this very reliably is not all that tough. And as long as you have some other flexible energy cost cards, some 1s and 2s, it's not going to be hard to make full use of that discount either. Because of course, if you save an energy, you're going to want to make sure you're still filling in something else with that leftover energy. So some 1 drops, a Kitty Pride, that sort of stuff could easily fill in the gaps here, which means Surge is, significant card in a lot of ways when it comes down on 2. Clearly a card that falls off because, if you play this on turn 6, it's just a 2/2. Obviously that's going to suck, but it's so game defining, so game plan rewarding when it is played on time. We've seen so many cards like this work, Angela, classic example. Great when played on 2, pretty terrible when played late. A little better these days now that she's a 2/3, but back when she was a 2/0, you didn't care because Angela when played on 2 was so significant. Surge is going to be in that exact same space. So in other words, not that hard to pull this condition off reliably. I think you'll very often hit 3 or 4 conditions on this satisfied. I think really swingy when you do, just an enormous high output, high tempo kind of card. That makes this card look very, very strong. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is one that could be pushed up to 3 even, and would still be kind of an interesting card. If this was a 3/3, for instance, you might still be happy to play this just because that is still a big payoff. At 2, this looks like a no-brainer for a lot of decks. All right, so moving on here, this is Prodigy. Pretty cool card. This is a 3/4 on reveal. If this is in the back row, copy the text of the card in front of it, which, let's be clear, number one, that can be totally insane. Copying an Iron Man is nuts. A 3/4 Iron Man is just a ridiculous play, particularly in a location with another Iron Man, doubling those up. That's crazy. But it does have this positional demand, which we saw a little bit of this in our last leaked cards video with some of the Agent Carter stuff. And I like that Marvel Snap is getting into this world where positioning within your own locations actually matters. So not only does this need to be in the back row, but keep in mind there's going to have to be basically a card played between whatever you want to copy and Prodigy. So if the card you want to copy is in the top left, you got to play something next to it, and then Prodigy is your 3rd card, falls behind the 1st card, or alternatively, you could go 2 and 4 as the other slots there for your Prodigy, which, you know, could create some kind of like sequencing or overcommitment problems a little bit. Like, let's use that Iron Man example, for instance. You know, there's probably a really cool turn with like Iron Man into Mystique into Prodigy. Oh my God, I have 3 Iron Mans. But there's a little weirdness there, right? Because your Mystique would have, if you play like Iron Man on 5, and then, you know, Mystique is your first card on 6, you need to create that 1 card buffer between Iron Man and Prodigy to make sure the Prodigy slides in behind the Iron Man. So you'd have to put the Mystique in the Iron Man location and then also the Prodigy, which, I mean, that would be insane. That'd be 3 Iron Mans, right? That'd be nuts. But how are you winning somewhere else? Did you do enough earlier to win somewhere else? I mean, maybe that's a possibility. So it's almost like you need a Wisp or something, right? As a little like blocker of sorts, where you put the Wisp in to make sure the Prodigy falls where you want, which might not actually be a crazy card combo with Prodigy, just to make sure you have a little bit more fine tuning on where he lands. But you can just see what I mean. Like, you have to follow certain like play order and sequencing elements to make sure Prodigy ends up in the right spots, which isn't necessarily a hard thing to do. It just might limit some of the kind of like combinations that are possible or timing that's possible. Also, needless to say, Prodigy's probably a card you're always going to want to play much later in the game. Unlikely you're playing this on turn 3 and happy about it. This is not like, you know, an ongoing card either. I mean, it's possible you play like an Ant-Man on 1 and then something on 2, and Prodigy slides in behind Ant-Man, and like that's a decent card, right? Like, it's still a 3/8 Prodigy, which is cool. So you don't have to get crazy with it. But if you want like those insane higher powered pop-offs, or this is copying the text of something bigger and more meaningful, probably a card that does come down later. That said, you know, yes, there's some conditionality there around the positioning and the timing of this, but the payoff is so big potentially. I think decks will find a way to make this work. I think it does have some pretty significant output when it lines up, and that's probably going to be worth a little bit of trouble. All right, so next up here is Esme Cuckoo. These names, dude. She's another 3/4 with on reveal, copy a card from your deck into your hand and set its cost to 3 and power to 4, which, I mean, that's a great effect, right? Classic example we just had, Iron Man. I love 3/4 Iron Mans. We just established that Iron Man would be insane. But basically anything that's high costed, right, you're going to be able to save significant cost on. So like, okay, you're running Iron Man. What if you also have Onslaught? Well, now we have a 3/4 Onslaught. Love it. I'll take a 3/4 Onslaught all day. I mean, it's even good with like on reveal cards too, right? I mean, I don't know, a White Tiger, basically anything in the Mr. Negative family, really. White Tiger, a 3/4 White Tiger? Absolutely, sure, that's great. Anything where you're, you know, able to bring down the cost and simultaneously bring up the power, that is just like a 2-for-1 that is kind of amazing. So this card just, like, man, ongoing decks, on reveal decks that are built in that way in particular, maybe even Mr. Negative decks are okay. I don't know if it'd make the cut or make, you know, if there'd be enough room in a Mr. Negative deck necessarily, but just so many potentially really high payoff kind of cards here that Esme seems like flexible, power spiky. I love how unpredictable it is, how much snap equity it offers, because the opponent does not know what you got. Did they get a 3/4 Iron Man? Oh my God, I got to figure out how to deal with a 3/4 Iron Man. That is terrifying. Or maybe you whiffed and you didn't. They don't know. So you have a lot of upside there from a decision-making standpoint. So Esme is pretty cool, man. I think this card actually looks really high upside in specifically decks tuned for it. Ongoing in particular is a package that jumps out to me. Might even work okay with our last card as well, making Esme a flexible, powerful card. All right, so next up here we have Elixir, the first of a couple destroy synergy cards we're going to see. This is a 1/1. This guy actually looks really cool, kind of giving me Sunspot vibes, but maybe even more awesome. And he's got an activate too, which is cool. We haven't seen a lot of activate cards. The next time one of your cards is destroyed this turn, revive it here, which seems like a really powerful effect for a 1-drop, because anytime you destroy, well, really anything, even destroying another 1-drop, like, you still actually have a lot of like stat upside here. I was just like, this is not the example I was going to use, but just think about like a mill deck and like Misery destroying a Cable or a Yondu or something. Like, bringing a Cable back with Elixir, not a bad return on your investment. You get 3 extra stats, you get another on reveal going off. Like, that's actually kind of insane. I think perhaps even more exciting are like big targets. Initially, I was going to talk about, say, Nimrod or even a Sabertooth, right? Where you destroy a Nimrod or a Sabertooth, and this gives you a nice body back, like a 5-power Sabertooth, a 6-power Nimrod. Maybe you do Shuri Nimrod, and then you destroy the Nimrod, and this gives you a 12-power Nimrod back on a 1-drop. Think about that. That's insane, right? Like reviving a card that's that big for only 1 cost, and you can play this down early too. It's really easy to sequence and time this out because the activate aspect, like that is insanely high payoff for any deck that is destroying anything. Like I said, it doesn't even have to be crazy. Cable's cool. That's a 1/4 with a good on reveal. Anything bigger is like the sky is absolutely the limit here on Elixir. So this could even be like a Shang-Chi protection where it's like, hey man, you want to Shang-Chi me? I'm gonna do an Elixir here to protect myself, kind of like a reverse Fenris Wolf almost. You know how big Fenris Wolf stat output can be when that goes off. So I don't know, dude. This card just looks busted for me for 1 mana. Like that is a crazy return on cost. Not that hard to work with either. Activate timing is perfect. This just looks very, very strong. All right, so moving on here, we have Kid Omega, another activate destroy card. This is a 2/2 this time. Activate, destroy the next card you play this turn to gain its power. So take everything I just said and then duplicate it into this card. Equally insane here, and this actually has the destroy trigger itself as well. These are basically 2 sides of the same coin, right? Because this one, by reviving it, you're getting the stats with the Elixir, and with this one, you're getting the stats as well. The body's not there on board, but you're still just getting the stats. So, like, think about Shuri Nimrod again, right? Shuri Nimrod. You could even activate the Kid Omega in between to immediately destroy the 12-power Nimrod off of Shuri. This is going to gain 12 power. I think it will. It might actually only gain 6 based on the sequencing there, but I think it'll gain 12 because the Nimrods will be 12 when copied. Either way, it doesn't even actually matter because both would be insane. Having that instant Nimrod activator is insane. Gaining 6 would honestly be crazy because this would be a 2/8. Gaining 12, like, forget it, a 2/14. Come on, dude. That's absolutely absurd. Again, with activate, it's just the timing, it works perfectly whenever you need it. That sets up for even more crazy Nimrod plays on turn 6 with like Carnage and Venom. You could just have an entire board. Maybe just, another Deadpool activator is actually okay. You've got a 4 or 8 power Deadpool or something on turn 5. Kid Omega, another way to easily destroy that Deadpool and gain some big stats. Like, there's just so much you can do with this. It has crazy high power output to match. Both of these cards look completely overtuned to me and kind of insane as destroy enablers. I don't know if these can be printed like this. Am I crazy? Like, don't these just look really, really strong as it stands? I feel like these could each go up 1 energy and still be pretty amazing cards. So I guess we'll see if these actually survive into release looking this good. All right, so moving on here, we've got a little bit of a move package. We're going to talk about a few cards in. This is Hellion, a 5/8 with on reveal. Next turn, you can move cards to this location, which you might say to yourself, hey, that sounds a lot like Cloak. What's the deal? Why is this a 5/8? Well, Cloak is symmetrical. Both players can use Cloak to move cards, which can, enable other move decks, of course, but also just creates a lot of kind of unpredictability and risk. Whereas with Hellion, you're netting the upside of the unpredictability without giving your opponent any of that same unpredictability. So not only can you, activate your awesome move stuff, but they can't do that. And, that gives you a lot more freedom. Now, that said, I don't really still think this is worth it for a 5/8. I like that the stat line on this is pretty chunky. It doesn't feel like terrible to play necessarily, but also because the stat line is so chunky, you're also kind of committing a lot of power into a singular location potentially, because if you're moving something big and, if it's a vulture and you're hoping to proc some extra stats on that vulture, you might be kind of overcommitted a little bit of a location. And ultimately showing your hand to the opponent too, like, oh, well, obviously they've already got 8 power there. They're going to be moving more stuff there. Like, I'm probably not going to be able to contest that. I'm just going to go elsewhere. So although you are getting an asymmetrical informational benefit, at the same time, you're kind of nodding to the opponent as well a little bit, showing your hand to some extent. I mean, clearly there are ways to manipulate that again, like Heimdall, etc., you know. But I just don't think this is really going to be worth it as a 5/8. That is an awfully expensive turn when you can sometimes just do a lot of other things and move decks. Also, it's just really railroading yourself into that turn 6. If you even are using like Heimdall or something, you know, just playing an 8 and a 10, that does not feel big enough to me. So I'm not really excited on this one. There's some part of me thinks this could feel a little bit like a placeholder, where maybe this is a card that's going to get changed. Alternatively, like maybe this is a reward card for one of the like events, like Sanctum Showdown or High Voltage or whatever. Those cards tend to be a little bit lower power level, unfortunately. So those are possibilities here for this one. As it stands, I'm not all that excited about Hellion. Now that said, we have some other move cards here that are, I think, far more interesting. This is Xorn, a 2/3. This reads, after any 3 or 4 cost card is played here, move it to another location. And this is actually a pretty great move activator for your 3s and 4s. I think that makes it particularly exciting for something like Vulture played on curve. I guess there's also Red Wing now. I don't think we have any 4-drop like move payoff cards where you're like really excited to move something at 4 at the moment. So for you using this for your side of things, probably most excited about the 3 cost cards, but this is just a great way to just reliably have that. Now, also keep in mind, this does say any in capital letters, which means it also works for opponent's cards, which could make the opponent's life a little bit awkward trying to actually contest the Xorn location. Certainly for decks that rely on 3 and 4 cost cards for a lot of their power output. Think about Surtur, for instance. Maybe not an example that holds up particularly well since all the nerfs, but you get the idea. Those kinds of decks could have a hard time challenging Xorn because their cards are just bouncing away. At the same token, you could have a hard time too if you're relying on 3s and 4s. You're also gonna have a hard time getting yours there, so you might need to make sure you have 5 or a 6 or something that is able to shore up the Xorn spot. So a little bit chaos inducing in that way, where it can just shift cards around a lot. But ultimately, I just, you know, a good little proactive move enabler, which can be nice. Sometimes move stuff is like really sequence heavy, you know, think about Iron Fist, etc. You got to time it exactly right to make sure it all works. Sometimes it's kind of after the fact, like Ghost Spider, which can also be awkward to weave into turns. I like that Xorn, you can just set it and forget it, and you know anytime I have a 3 that I want to move, my Red Wing, my Vulture, whatever it is, it's just there. That's a great spot to put them in, and I know I don't have to like sequence anything out or save energy for later or whatever. It just works. That's pretty cool. That might be enough upside on Xorn standalone here to be worth it. You know, ultimately just a 2/3 though, so at the same time I could see decks kind of cutting this in favor of just more focused move packages that have higher output than just a 2/3. All right, so moving on here to Mercury. This is a 2/2. It reads, you can move this once ongoing. Enemy cards here can't move, which that's kind of a cool little effect, right? A little move counter of sorts, a tech card against move, which has some flexibility too as a movement card. So if you put it in the wrong spot, like on turn 2, and then they don't seem to be doing anything there, their Madam Web goes down in a different location, you can just move the Mercury over to the Madam Web spot and lock down that Madam Web location, which that's cool. I think that's fine. You know, the fact that it can move also could buff your own move deck a little bit, technically, if you're running Cravens and stuff. I'm never that excited about tech cards like this because we don't usually see meta shares for any given archetype that are so high that tech cards really feel worth it. Because like, yeah, okay, in the 15% of move games I play against, this is an okay card when I hit it on turn 2, which doesn't always happen either. But the other 85% of matchups I play, is this worth it? It's kind of like a bad Nightcrawler or something in those cases, right? Probably hard to find the situational upside on Mercury in those scenarios. So I don't know, cards like this, I think this could actually be like a 2/3 or something, you know, just make it a better base stat line so you don't feel as bad running it as it stands. As it stands right now as a move counter, I just don't really see it being worth it. And yeah, there you go. Those are the 8 cards in this round of Datamine. So let's go ahead and rank these from the card I think is going to be the best down to the worst. My number 1 card is Surge. My number 2 card is Kid Omega. My number 3 card is Elixir. My number 4 card is Esme Cuckoo. My number 5 card is Prodigy. My number 6 card is Xorn. Number 7 is Hellion. Number 8 is Mercury. And yeah, there you go, man. The move card's bringing up the rear. This seems a little underwhelming to me. This destroy package seems insane. Really could have put either of these above each other. My thought was Elixir's a little easier dealt with, like Killmongers and stuff. Kind of makes your own Killmonger harder, maybe in a destroy deck. So gave him the number 3 spot, but both seem like they have just insane output potential. You know, we talked about like a 113 here, and it doesn't even have to be that. A 215 or something, 214. What are we talking about? Yeah, 214. Some like crazy potential numbers here. Esme and Surge got good spots because they just seem like pretty good general use cards. Surge seems like kind of a backbone card. A lot of decks could actually squeeze in. So I don't know if her like ceiling is as high as the destroy stuff in my mind, but her like general usability seems higher, I think. And still really high output card nonetheless. Could create some broken chains. So Surge got the number 1 spot for me. So share your thoughts down below. How would you rank these cards? Is this destroy stuff like not as broken as I think? I saw some other folks talking about it and they didn't seem as high on it as me. Like turning this into a 1-4, a 1-6, a 1-13 is not that crazy, right? Like it's actually pretty achievable. I don't know. This looks really good to me. So I guess we'll see what you guys think down in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and I guess I will see you around.